Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The rain was doing that thing again. Not quite a downpour, but persistent enough to make the world outside my living room window look like a watercolor painting left out. In a drizzle, grays and greens bled into each other, the streetlights casting hazy halos on the slick pavement. It was the kind of Tuesday night perfect for curling up with a book and a cup of chamomile tea, exactly what I'd been doing for the past hour. The house was quiet, just the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the soft sigh of the rain against the glass. It had been quiet like this often, ever since Robert passed away 3 years ago. Sometimes the quiet was peaceful, a welcome friend. Other times, like tonight, it felt a little too vast, a little too empty. I had just resettled myself on the sofa, pulling the knitted throw blanket higher around my shoulders when the doorbell chimed. It was startling, unexpected. Nobody ever just dropped by anymore, especially not on a dreary weeknight. My first thought was maybe it was Mrs. Gable from next door, needing help with something again. I marked my page in the novel, a comforting mystery, nothing too demanding, and padded towards the front door. Peering through the peephole, the porch light illuminated a figure I vaguely recognized, but couldn't immediately place. A man, tallish, holding a collapsed umbrella that dripped onto the welcome mat. He looked familiar, like someone from a gathering, a barbecue maybe? I hesitated for a second. It was late-ish, nearly 9, but something in his stance, the way he shifted his weight, didn't seem threatening. More uncertain, I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door a crack, keeping the chain latched. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding a bit rusty from disuse. The man looked up, surprise flickering across his features before settling into a polite, slightly weary smile. "Sarah? Sarah Miller?" "Yes." "Hi, it's Mark. Mark Jensen, Lisa's brother-in-law." Recognition clicked. Lisa, my closest friend since college. Her husband, Tom, had a brother, Mark. I'd met him a handful of times over the years, usually at big family events. Lisa hosted summer barbecues, a couple of holiday parties. He was Tom's younger brother. Always seemed pleasant enough, though quiet. We'd never really had a proper conversation beyond polite small talk. Seeing him here, on my doorstep on a rainy Tuesday night, was decidedly odd. "Mark, yes, of course. Wow, hello." I fumbled with the chain lock, releasing it and opening the door wider. What brings you out this way? Is everything okay with Lisa and Tom?" That was my immediate concern, that something had happened. He offered another small smile, shaking his head. Raindrops clung to his hair and the shoulders of his jacket. "Oh no, everyone's fine. Sorry to just show up like this. I know it's late." He gestured vaguely down the street. I was actually nearby, had a late meeting that ran over, and, well, I was driving past, saw your lights on. He paused, looking a little sheepish. "Honestly, I suddenly remembered Lisa mentioning you lived around here, and I just acted on impulse. Probably shouldn't have. I can go." There was something in his voice, a tiredness perhaps, that tugged at me. It was strange, yes, but turning him away felt wrong. Besides, Lisa would probably give me an earful if she found out I'd left her brother-in-law standing in the rain. No, don't be silly," I said, stepping back. "Come in, get out of the wet. You look soaked." He hesitated for just a fraction of a second longer, then stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of rain and cool night air. He carefully placed his dripping umbrella on the tile floor by the door. "Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate it. Really, I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all." I lied slightly because my quiet evening was definitely intruded upon, but my curiosity was now fully piqued. Let me take your jacket. Go on through to the living room. Make yourself comfortable. I helped him out of his damp coat, noting the quality of the fabric, the faint scent of sandalwood, aftershave mixed with the rain. He seemed solid, dependable, like his brother Tom. But there was a different energy about him, something less settled than Tom. I hung his jacket on the coat rack, hoping it wouldn't drip too much on the hardwood floor. When I walked into the living room, he was standing near the fireplace, looking at the photos on the mantelpiece. There was one of Robert and me, younger, laughing, on a trip to Maine. That's a great picture, he said quietly, turning as I entered. Lisa's shown me a few photos, but you two looked really happy. We were, I said, the familiar pang hitting my chest, softened by time, but never truly gone. That was a wonderful trip. An awkward silence stretched for a moment, filled only by the ticking clock and the drumming rain. Can I get you something? I offered, moving towards the kitchen. Tea? Coffee? Or maybe something stronger. It feels like a night for it. He ran a hand through his damp hair. You know, a cup of tea sounds perfect, if it's not too much trouble. No trouble at all. As I headed to the kitchen to put the kettle on, I couldn't shake the feeling that this quiet, unexpected visit from my friend's brother-in-law was about more than just seeking shelter from the rain. The night suddenly felt less empty, charged with a strange, low hum of possibility. The mystery wasn't in my book anymore. It was standing in my living room. The kettle whistled softly, a comforting sound breaking the quiet tension. I found 2 mugs, sturdy ceramic ones that felt good in the hand, and debated between the chamomile I'd been drinking and something a bit more robust. English breakfast seemed more appropriate for company. As I arranged the mugs, sugar bowl, and a small pitcher of milk on a tray, I could hear Mark moving slightly in the living room, the soft tread of his shoes on the area rug. It was strange having someone else's presence fill the space usually occupied only by my memories and routines. Not unwelcome, just different. When I carried the tray back in, he was sitting on the armchair opposite the sofa, elbows resting on his knees, looking thoughtful rather than uncomfortable. He looked up as I entered and offered a grateful smile. Smells good. Thank you, Sarah. This is really kind of you. It's just tea, I said, setting the tray down on the coffee table between us. Help yourself. I poured hot water over the tea bags, the rich aroma filling the air. Milk? Sugar? Just a splash of milk, please. I prepared his tea and handed it to him, then made mine. Sitting back on the sofa, I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. The simple act felt grounding. So I began gently, not wanting to pry but needing to understand. You had a late meeting around here? He nodded, taking a careful sip of his tea. Yeah, over on Elm Street. Client dinner that dragged on. You know how it is. He worked in finance. I recalled Lisa mentioning once. High-pressure stuff. Driving back, I took a wrong turn somewhere, ended up cutting through this neighborhood, and like I said, saw the lights. He paused, swirling the tea in his mug. Truth be told, Sarah, it wasn't just the rain. It's been a long day, a long week, really. There it was. The real reason wasn't the rain or a wrong turn. It was something heavier. I didn't push, just waited, letting the silence sit comfortably between us for a moment. The rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the windows. Anything you want to talk about? I offered, eventually keeping my tone light. Sometimes just saying things out loud helps. Or not. No pressure either way. He looked at me, then, a direct gaze that held a surprising depth. I'd only ever seen him in crowded rooms, making polite small talk. Up close, his eyes were a warm brown, flecked with gold, and they held a certain weariness, but also intelligence and sensitivity. It's work stuff mostly, he started, then hesitated, and other things, life things, I guess. He gave a short, self-deprecating laugh. Sounds pretty vague, doesn't it? Life things rarely fit into neat little boxes. I replied, believe me, I know. That seemed to relax him slightly. He took another sip of tea. Lisa mentioned you, went through a tough time a few years back, with your husband. He said it carefully, respectfully. I nodded. Robert, yes, it was sudden. I'm sorry, he said sincerely. I remember Tom and Lisa were very worried about you. They were good friends, I acknowledged. Still are. Lisa checks in on me constantly. Sometimes I think she worries too much. She's protective of the people she cares about, Mark said with a soft smile. It's one of her best qualities. And her most annoying, he added, and we both chuckled. It broke the ice a little further. So, these life things, I prompted gently after a moment. Are they Tom and Lisa worrying level? Or just Mark needs a friendlier level? He considered this, looking down into his mug. Probably somewhere in between. Nothing catastrophic. Just feeling a bit adrift, I suppose. You ever get that feeling? Like you're doing all the things you're supposed to be doing, ticking all the boxes, but you're not entirely sure what direction the ship is heading. His words resonated deeply. Adrift. Yes, that was exactly how I'd felt for months, maybe years, even before Robert passed, if I was honest. Floating along, routines buffering the sides, but without a clear destination in mind. More often than I'd like to admit, I confessed. It's easy to get caught up in the currents, isn't it? He looked up, a flicker of surprise and connection in his eyes. Yeah, it is. He leaned back slightly in the armchair, seeming to settle into the space. I guess I just needed a port in the storm, and your light was on. He smiled faintly. Sorry to mix metaphors so badly. Don't worry about it, I said, smiling back. My metaphorical port is always open for bad metaphors and people caught in the rain. Have another biscuit. I pushed the plate slightly towards him. He took one, his fingers brushing mine almost imperceptibly as he did. A tiny spark, unexpected, surprising. It wasn't flirtatious, not really, just a moment of human contact that felt amplified in the quiet room. We talked then, easily drifting from topic to topic. We discovered a shared love for old black and white movies, the kind that played on Sunday afternoons when we were kids. He mentioned a fondness for hiking, something Robert and I used to do all the time, but I hadn't found the motivation for lately. He asked about my job at the library and listened, really listened, when I talked about the satisfaction of connecting someone with the perfect book. It wasn't earth-shattering conversation, but it flowed. There was an ease between us I wouldn't have predicted. The initial awkwardness had completely dissolved, replaced by a quiet camaraderie. The rain continued its soft drumming, a constant soundtrack to our unexpected meeting. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 10, the resonant chimes momentarily overlaying our conversation. Mark glanced towards the sound, then back at me. Wow, is it that late already? I should probably think about heading off. I've kept you long enough. Honestly, Mark, don't worry about the time, I said, meaning it. The prospect of the house falling silent again suddenly seemed less appealing than it had an hour ago. My book isn't going anywhere. I paused, then added, unless you need to get back, of course. He hesitated, swirling the last of the tea in his mug. No, not really. Nothing waiting for me, but an empty apartment. He said it lightly, but there was an undercurrent I recognized, the echo of solitude. He wasn't married. I knew that much from Lisa. Never had been, I thought she'd said, focused on his career. Another casualty of the adrift feeling? I asked gently. He gave a wry smile. Something like that. You build a life, work hard, climb the ladder, and then you look around one day and realize the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. Or maybe just a wall you're not that interested in anymore. He sighed, a deeper breath this time. I turned 50 last year. It makes you take stock, you know? I knew exactly. 48 had felt like a turning point for me too, even before Robert's death threw everything into sharper relief. The sense of time accelerating, of wondering if the path you were on was the one you truly wanted. 50 is just a number, I offered, though I knew it was more than that. But yes, milestones do tend to make us reflective, sometimes uncomfortably so. Uncomfortably is the word. He agreed. He looked around the room again, his gaze lingering on the bookshelves crammed with novels, the comfortable clutter of a life lived. You've made a really nice home here, Sarah. It feels warm, grounded. Thank you, I said, feeling a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the tea. It took time, especially after I trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. It must have been incredibly difficult, he said quietly, his gaze meeting mine again. There was no pity in it, just simple, empathetic understanding. And that, I realized, was incredibly rare. People often didn't know what to say, fumbling with condolences or avoiding the topic altogether. His directness, coupled with genuine empathy, felt strangely comforting. It was, I admitted, for a long time, it felt like walking through fog. Everything muffled, indistinct. You just put one foot in front of the other because you have to. And now, he asked softly, is the fog lifting? I thought about it. Had it lifted? Or had I just gotten used to navigating through it? Mostly, I said, there are still foggy days. But there are clear ones too. Sunny ones. Even, I smiled slightly. Tonight, with the rain, maybe it's just a bit misty. He nodded slowly, absorbing my words. Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. I know it's not easy to talk about. It's okay, I replied. Sometimes talking to someone who's outside the immediate circle is easier. Less baggage, maybe. Maybe, he agreed. He leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest. Can I tell you something about why I really stopped? I held my breath for a second, curious. Of course. That meeting tonight, he began, lowering his voice slightly, though there was no one else to hear. It wasn't just a client dinner. It was with my boss. He offered me a big promotion, partner track, the thing I've supposedly been working towards for the last 20 years. Wow, Mark, congratulations, I said instinctively. He shook his head slowly. That's the thing. I should be thrilled, popping champagne. Instead, driving away from there, all I felt was hollow, empty, like getting exactly what you thought you wanted, only to realize it won't make you happy. He looked down at his hands, and I drove around for a bit, just thinking about what would make me happy. And I honestly didn't have an answer. That's when I ended up here. Saw your lights. And I thought, he trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed again. You thought what? I prompted gently. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe just that talking to someone normal, someone outside of that whole corporate world, might help me clear my head. Someone grounded. He looked up at me. Someone like you, I guess. From what Lisa said over the years, you always seemed very centered. Centered? Me? If only he knew the internal chaos I often felt. But perhaps compared to the high-stakes world he inhabited, my quiet life at the library, my cozy, rain-streaked house, did seem like an anchor. Well, I don't know about centered. I chuckled softly, but I'm a good listener, and I make decent tea. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes this time, erasing some of the weariness. You do. The tea is excellent. We sat in comfortable silence for another minute, the shared vulnerability hanging in the air, creating a delicate, invisible thread between us. It wasn't romantic, not in the conventional sense. It was deeper than that, a sudden, unexpected meeting of minds, of souls feeling similarly adrift. The rain outside seemed to soften, the drumming turning into a gentle hush. The world outside felt distant, muffled. Inside, in the warm lamplight, a connection had been forged, quiet and profound, born from an unexpected knock on the door and a shared sense of searching. It was the most surprising and, in its own way, the most intimate conversation I'd had in years. The grandfather clock chimed the half hour. 11:30. Mark sighed again, this time with a sense of resolution. Okay, now I really should let you get back to your evening, he said, pushing himself up from the armchair. Thank you, Sarah, for the tea, the conversation, for letting me barge in like this. You didn't barge. I corrected him, standing up as well. You arrived, and you were welcome. I walked with him towards the front door. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving behind glistening streets and the clean scent of washed earth. A sliver of moon peeked through a break in the clouds. He paused at the door, turning back to face me. The porch light cast shadows, highlighting the lines of tiredness around his eyes, but also the sincerity in his expression. I feel better, he said, simply, clearer, not about the job, maybe, but just less alone in the feeling, you know? I know, I replied softly. Sometimes that's all it takes, knowing you're not the only one navigating the fog. He nodded, holding my gaze for a moment longer than necessary. Again, it wasn't overtly anything, but it felt significant. A silent acknowledgement of the connection we'd shared, the unexpected understanding found in a few hours of conversation. Well, he said, finally breaking the gaze and reaching for the doorknob. Thanks again. Seriously, anytime, Mark. Drive safe. I opened the door for him. He stepped out onto the damp porch, retrieving his umbrella, though he wouldn't need it now. He turned back one last time. Maybe I could call you sometime. Perhaps we could grab that coffee, talk more about old movies. The question hung in the cool night air, tentative but hopeful. My breath hitched slightly. It wasn't something I had expected or even considered. My life had settled into a predictable rhythm, and the thought of intentionally disrupting it, of stepping towards something new, was both daunting and strangely exhilarating. But the evening had felt, right, honest, real. I'd like that, Mark, I heard myself say, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. I'd like that very much. A genuine smile spread across his face, transforming it. Great, that's great. He gave a small nod. Good night, Sarah. Good night, Mark. I watched him walk down the path and get into a dark sedan parked a little way down the street. The engine started quietly, and the headlights cut through the darkness as he drove away. I stood in the doorway for a few moments longer, breathing in the cool, clean air. The house behind me felt quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet now. Not empty, but contemplative, filled with the echo of shared thoughts and the warmth of unexpected connection. Closing the door, I leaned against it for a moment, processing the whirlwind of the last few hours. My friend's brother-in-law, a man I barely knew, had shown up unexpectedly, seeking refuge not just from the rain, but from a deeper, internal storm. And somehow, in sharing our vulnerabilities, our questions about life's direction, we had found a moment of profound clarity and companionship. Nothing dramatic had happened in the way a sensational headline might suggest. There were no shocking revelations, no grand gestures, just conversation, just honesty, just two people finding a moment of solace and understanding together on an ordinary rainy night. I walked back into the living room, picking up the cooled mugs and the plate with the lone remaining biscuit. My abandoned book lay on the sofa cushion, seeming less appealing now. My own thoughts were more compelling. I hadn't solved Mark's dilemma about his job, nor had I suddenly charted a new course for my own life. But something had shifted. That feeling of being adrift, while still present, felt less isolating. Knowing someone else, someone seemingly successful and put together like Mark, felt it too, made it feel normal, human. I went to the window and looked out at the rain-washed street, the moon now brighter between the scattering clouds. The world looked clearer, somehow, fresher. Maybe, I thought, personal discovery doesn't always come in thunderclaps. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a knock on the door on a rainy night. Sometimes it's found in the simple act of listening, of sharing, of recognizing a piece of your own searching soul in the eyes of an unexpected visitor. It wasn't about romance or fixing each other's problems. It was about connection, pure, simple human connection, and the quiet realization that even when you feel adrift, you're never truly alone on the sea. The possibility of coffee, of another conversation, lingered in the air, a small, hopeful light, like the porch light I'd left on, unknowingly signaling a safe harbor. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a quiet sense of anticipation for what the next tide might bring.